Reading Lesson 115, Video Part 2. Today's reading is Chapter 25, Tom and Becky in the Cave. Some questions to keep in mind today for the reading. Why did Tom and Becky get lost in the cave? The story says the deep stillness of the place laid a clammy hand upon the spirits of the children. Explain what that sentence means. Do you think it was wise of Tom to avoid the bats when he and Becky started back? Explain your answer. Tom says the other children might hear his yells. Then the story says the might was even more horrible than the ghostly laughter of the echoes. Explain what that sentence means. Why do you think Becky dreamed about a beautiful country? And for your writing portion today, Becky dreams about a beautiful country. What's your idea of a beautiful country? Write a description of a beautiful country. Try to answer the following questions. What is the shape of the country? What things grow there? What animals live there? What is the weather like? What sights, sounds, and smells are there? Make your description at least 80 words long. Now let us begin today's reading. Now let us return to Tom and Becky's part in the picnic. They walked along the dark aisles with the rest of the children and visited the familiar wonders of the cave. Presently, a hide-and-seek game began, and Tom and Becky took part in it until they grew tired. Then they wandered down a curving path. They held their candles up and read the names, dates, and addresses and notes that had been written on the rocky walls with candle smoke. They drifted along and scarcely noticed that they were now in a part of the cave without any writing on the walls. They wrote their own names under an overhanging shelf and moved on. Presently, they came to a small waterfall. Tom squeezed his small body behind the waterfall and found a sort of steep natural stairway enclosed between narrow walls. At once, he wanted to explore this new area. Becky responded to his call, and they made a smoke mark for future reference. They wound this way and that, far down into the secret depths of the cave, made another mark and branched off in search of curiosities to tell the upper world about it. In one place they found a spacious cavern. Shining stalactites, there's your vocab word, as big as a man's leg hung from the ceiling. They walked around the cavern, wondering and admiring. Then they left the cavern by one of the numerous passages that came into it. This passage soon brought them to an enchanting spring whose bottom was covered with glittering crystals. The spring was in a cavern where stalactites and stalagmites, both your vocab words, joined together to form pillars. Under the roof of the cavern, vast knots of bats had packed themselves together, thousands in a bunch. The light disturbed the creatures, and they came flocking down by hundreds, squeaking and darting furiously at the candles. Tom knew about bats and how dangerous they could be. He seized Becky's hand and hurried with her into the first corridor they found. And none too soon, for a bat struck Becky's light out with its wing while she was passing out of the cavern. The bats chased the children a good distance, but the children plunged into the new passage they found, and at last they were free of the bats. Tom soon found an underground lake which stretched away until its shape was lost in the shadows. He wanted to explore its borders, but concluded it would be best to sit down and rest a while. Now, for the first time, the deep stillness of the place laid a clammy hand upon the spirits of the children. Becky said, "Why, I didn't notice, but it seems ever so long since I heard any of the others. Come to think of it, Becky, we are way down below them, and I don't think how far away to the north or south or east or whichever direction they are, we couldn't hear them here." Becky grew apprehensive. "I wonder how long we've been down here, Tom. We better start back." "Yes, I reckon we better. Perhaps we better. Can you find the way, Tom? It's all mixed up to me." "I reckon I can find it, but then there's the bats. If they put both our candles out, it would be an awful fix. Let's try some other way so we can avoid the bats." "Well, all right, but I hope we won't get lost. It would be so awful." The girl shuddered at the dreadful possibilities. Tom and Becky started through a passage and they walked in a silence along the way. They glanced at each new opening to see if there was anything familiar about it, but every one was strange. Every time Tom made an examination, Becky would watch his face for an encouraging sign, and he would say cheerily, "Oh, it's all right. This ain't the one, but we'll come to it right away." Tom felt less and less hopeful with each failure. He soon began to turn off into passages at random in the desperate hope of finding the one he wanted. He continued to say it was all right, but the words had lost their ring in the sound and sounded just as if he had said, "All is lost." At last, Becky said, "Oh, Tom, never mind the bats. Let's go back that way. We seem to get worse and worse off all the time." Tom stopped. "Listen," he said. Profound silence. Silence so deep that their breathing was the loudest sound. Tom shouted. The call went echoing down the empty aisles and died out in the distance in a faint sound that resembled laughter. "Oh, don't yell again, Tom. It is too horrid," said Becky. "It is horrid, but I better, Becky. They might hear us, you know," as he shouted again. The might was even more horrible than the ghostly laughter of the echoes. The two children stood still and listened, but they heard nothing. Tom turned around at once and hurried back, but he could not find his way back. Becky said, "Oh, Tom, you didn't make any marks." "Becky, I was such a fool. Such a fool. I never thought we might want to come back. No, I can't find the way. It's all mixed up. Tom, we're lost. We're lost. We never can get out of this awful place. Oh, why did we ever leave the others?" Tom and Becky moved on again, aimlessly, simply at random. All they could do was to move, to keep moving. For a little while, their hope revived, but only for a while. By and by, Tom took Becky's candle and blew it out. Words were not needed. Becky understood, and her hope died again. She knew that Tom had a whole candle and 3 or 4 pieces in his pockets, yet he must save them. By and by, the children grew tired. It was dreadful to think of sitting down when time was so precious. Moving in some direction in any direction was at least progress, but to sit down was to invite death. At last they sat down. They walked off home and friends there, and the comfortable beds, and above all, the light. Becky soon drowsed off to sleep. Tom sat looking into her worried face and saw it grow smooth and natural under the influence of pleasant dreams. By and by, a smile dawned on Becky's face. This smile brought peace and healing to Tom's spirit, and his thoughts wandered away to bygone times and dreamy memories. While Tom was deep in his thoughts, Becky woke up with a breezy little laugh, but the laugh died on her lips, and a groan followed it. "I'm glad you've slept, Becky. You'll feel rested now, and we'll find the way out. We can try, Tom, but I've seen such a beautiful country in my dream. I reckon we're going there if we die." Maybe not. Cheer up, Becky, and let's keep trying." That concludes the chapter. So for logic in part E today, write the answer for items 1 and 2. Here are 3 rules of logic. Rule 1, just because you know about a part doesn't mean you know about the whole thing. Rule 2, just because you know about the whole thing doesn't mean you know about every part. Rule 3, just because 2 words sound the same doesn't mean they have the same meaning. Here's a statement. I wanted to buy 10 tickets for the movies, but when I went to the ticket window, the man said he could only sell me a pair. I told the man I wanted tickets, not fruit. 1. Which rule does the statement break? Here's another statement. I bought a box of Cruncho crackers the other day. The first cracker I pulled out of the box was burned. I didn't pull out any of the others. I was sure they were all burned. 2. Which rule does this statement break? Don't forget you have parts F and G along with your workbook. Get busy. Reach out to me on chat on Teams if you need any help.